Did you have a good Thanksgiving week?
It was fair. I thought I could make it back home. I thought I could go out early in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, get my Xbox Series X, and be back by like 7:30. Nah, nope. So my apologies.
Oh, no problem. No problem
And
at all.
I don't really I don't check Twitter as much anymore. So my mom was so focused on getting this Xbox that like I forgot about our masterminds once I was trying to hunt it down.
Oh yeah, no problem. I was kind of hoping to skip last week anyways, so I just
Yeah.
didn't hear back. So I'm like, well, I don't want to, tap out or anything and not tell you about it. But
No,
did
I
you
know.
did you get your Xbox, Lynn?
No.
I thought you had ordered one online and had it shipped,
You,
or is it?
you can't order it online.
Gotcha. So it's all
Like,
out everywhere.
I mean, they have these bots that continuously monitor various store websites to see when they have one in stock, and they immediately just buy it up and then resell it.
Yeah, that was my brother-in-law was telling me. He ended up, I think, because he owns like a game store, but he was buying ended up buying a PS5. He paid the scalping price for it because it's he couldn't get one, but he wanted one for the store so that he could have people come in or whatever. And then somebody offered to buy it for that expensive price from him. So people are willing to pretty much pay whatever, I think, at this point for them.
Man.
But yeah.
How's everything?
Good. Okay. I've had like a weird headache for like the last 2 weeks. Just hasn't gone away.
You ever got that checked out?
Not yet. If it lasts into next week, I'll probably get it checked out. But
it's kind of scary for it to persist that long.
Yeah, it's not. It's been persistent. It's not constant pain, but I just feel like just constantly this up here is just kind of like tight and foggy. So yeah, it is. It's creeping me out now. I thought for the first few days like, oh, this isn't a big deal. I'm like, well, maybe if maybe I'd had too many beers or something. So I'm like, I won't drink for a while, and then it still didn't go away. And yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I don't know. My current thesis is that my eyes are just bugging out from playing League of Legends. So I'm skipping out on doing that to see if that helps it. So
I've been investing a lot of time playing Halo Wars too. I mean, I'm getting better, but I still suck. If that makes any sense.
Are you playing that on? Is that on the original Xbox or
Xbox One? Yeah.
Yeah. Or yeah, Xbox One. I suppose.
Every morning, I gotta get it in. All right. Sometimes on my lunch breaks, I gotta get it in. So.
Yeah, games do that to you. They're it's powerful because you can see progression so well.
Yeah,
and
I'm hella competitive, so like I'm always like, lesson learned. Next time, this is the way I'm going to go about this when I'm confronted with this particular scenario, and it just I can't turn it off.
Yep. Yeah. Should get you into some League of Legends. If you get beyond the whoa, there's a lot to learn here phase. I mean, it's fairly competitive. I kept getting kind of pissed last week because I'm playing a different champion because so they have seasons in League of Legends, and every season they that's when they do competitive play, and then at the end of the season they'll do preseason, and they'll do like really big changes. Well, for the last 2 years, I've been playing the same character. His name is Tarek. He's a support character, and I had a pretty good idea of how to play him. I had a pretty good feel for, when I would run out of mana and stuff like that. And then they released all these item updates for preseason, and basically normally where I could go and just, pound on someone in the middle of battle and whatever, I run out of crap so quickly because they changed all these items. So the layout of his abilities is like just different. So I haven't been able to play him because he just sucks now. Plain and simple, or at least he sucks in the way that I played him. I'd have to invest time in figuring out how to get him played differently. But so I picked up this other guy, and I feel like I've been doing okay with him, but I don't know for what reason I'm just not. So I've been losing a lot. It's just been teeing me off. So had an interview, first screening interview on Tuesday or Wednesday rather. That went well. So I've got another one, a cultural interview next week. So we'll see how that goes. Pretty excited about this one though, because they're a company they're a e-commerce marketplace kind of company, but they're in a specific niche that I care about. So
okay, that's cool.
Yeah, because we were talking and I'm like, my brother-in-law owns this game store, and this is when COVID hit. This is exactly the kind of thing that he would have probably should have needed if he didn't have the funds to kind of hold out, to keep him up. And so I got a real connection with the actual the mission, or what they actually do as a company, not necessarily the technology yet, or the culture. I'm still getting there, but yeah, so I'm looking forward to that interview next week. We'll see if it goes anywhere. So
I'm getting a surge of, it's weird because I thought during the holiday season, like my phone wouldn't ring, and I'm getting a surge of phone calls and emails for Xamarin. Like Xamarin's hot right now. Don't ask me why.
yeah,
and I say that because I feel like it should have been hot like 3 years ago, but I'm getting a lot of phone calls.
I don't know why that would be, but yeah, I think, come to think of it, I've seen a little bit more of that poking around job boards and stuff. So
of course they don't want to pay my rate, but and then I had my second interview with a shop that specializes in they call it e-groceries, but it's pretty much back-end F# developer for order fulfillment. Like,
cool.
I mean, if I don't get that job, it'll just reinforce my belief system about woe is me. So it really will. Like, I know they were like, hey, the first phone call went well. We want you to take a coding test. I'm like, no. You can look at my GitHub. I've published 2 recent repos for syncing data and for an event store that sits on top of Azure Service Bus. Those are public. I sent them a screenshot of my private repos for mobile order fulfillment and said, I'm more than happy to share these repos with you and have a discussion in the next interview, but I'm not going to jump through hoops when I've already demonstrated all this. Like, I would do that for FANG, your top notch, high performing organizations of Google, Apple, Microsoft, etc. Microsoft's not included in FANG, but you know what I mean. But I'm not going to be auditioning and take everybody's coding test from my experience, that usually has nothing to do with F sharp, and usually almost has everything to do with ASP.NET or something like that. So,
Yeah.
So, and then like, man, people were like, Scott, your contract is wrapping up. Can you really afford to have your ego, take over? And I'm like, in regards to negotiating, I feel like, I mean, you can tell me what you think, but in regards to like negotiating, like if I want if I want to assert myself as a high end developer, and I want a high end like hourly rate or salary, then I feel like I need to like establish what I'm willing to tolerate and what I'm not willing to do.
Yeah.
Especially if regardless of reality, especially if I believe that I could back it up and I have artifacts out there that could be measured, right? And we can have a conversation about that. But for me to just audition and just go through everything that everybody else goes through, and I feel like it's unnecessary because my stuff is very transparent. Like I'm not hiding anything. You Google my name, a lot of stuff is already out there, and we can have a conversation about it. So why, if you know that I have hella code around this, and you know that, I mean, they talk on conference talk on at the F sharp skills matter thing. Like, why do you still want me to take a coding test? So,
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's a gamble, and it depends on what they're looking for. And like, I could see, like refusing to do it could be taken as, well, you consider yourself way above tasks, which you certain tasks, which you to a certain extent do, but sometimes the company needs you to do things that you just don't want to do. I think that there's two kinds of coding tests too that people might take with you. One where they're, they're going to look at it, immediately disqualify you or whatever, or it's tricky algorithms and stuff like that.
maybe like computer science and not business application development.
Yeah, and like that, those ones I actually believe they're kind of, they favor people that are directly out of college, or that don't have other obligations in life, that can actually study up. If they tell you ahead of time this is what what it's going to be around, and they give you time to prepare around particular algorithms that you haven't looked at in a long time, that's maybe a different story. I had one go do a like a hacker rank one, which created a small API to do something, and that one was actually really good.
Did it progress to the actual opportunity?
I would have had it got me through to the next screening interview, but they were looking for my skills were more in C# land, and they were looking more for React, so it wasn't a good fit at the time. But yeah, I did have one where it was more open-ended, and I wasn't really sure what they were looking for, and I think I bombed that one pretty hard because I spent too much time overthinking it. But I mean, I've read some people that do these tests. What they want to do is they want to get that you've got that an initial ability that so I mean, if you take it from their perspective, they probably get all types of people, and some people are trying to be nefarious, and they could even put as much stuff out there that you have that they've just ripped off from someone.
I understand that, but when you have if you have a technical like phone screen, and you tell them to go into detail, and you tell them to pull up the code base, and ask some questions about why they made certain decisions, like that stuff is extremely hard to fake.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is. I mean, that's my personal opinion. You can disagree with that, and I understand that like they may be inundated with applications, because I mean, who wouldn't want to make if you're a gas station clerk, or you wash cars for a living, like who wouldn't want to make $50 an hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
I understand that. So everybody and their grandmother is going to be applying for those jobs because there's no license that you have to deal with to declare yourself a programmer. But at the same time, and I think I still like John Simon. I mean, I like the older version of him. But
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, his newer version's very abrasive, but
he caters to a completely different
crowd.
Yeah. But I would say that maybe he probably would agree with me that taking the test, I think does more to work against me than works for me. So what I mean by that is, okay, I take your test, right? First, what's the likelihood that that test is going to be on the job that I'm applying for, right? That I'm actually interested in, versus some web framework. And I don't do like front end development, HTML, JavaScript, Angular. I don't do that, right? Now, if we talk about some web services, then yeah, sure. But the part that I'm arguing is, if I take that test, there's a high probability that it's going to work against me in regards to, oh, Scott, well, you scored a 80 or 85, so that 100 and let's say 70,000 K salary that you want, yeah, we, based on our policy and what you scored, we can only offer you 120. Like that's how I see things playing out, and I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't think they do that.
You don't think so? You don't think that happens?
I don't think that happens. Not in any firm that you'd actually want to work for. If they did do that, or yeah, if they did do it, well, then the thing is that you flip the script there. You've dodged a bullet if you can evaluate that that's what they've done. If you can get a price in mind in your first interview, and then the technical screening drops that because of that reason, well, geez, you've really dodged a bullet.
Well, their thought
goes both ways.
Their thought process would be, yeah, in hindsight, but their thought process would be, you get paid based on skill set and applicable experience, right? And so that's kind of vague, which means that we're not going to pay you the salary cap. We're going to find a reason to make sure that we have our bonus within the budget, and we give you just enough that we know that you'll say yes to. Right? I don't know. You say that's not likely, but I think it's very likely.
Yeah, I just don't see it being off of a test like that. Most of the time there might be hard negotiations on salary and stuff like that, but I don't see those tests shouldn't be really taken into account. Because there are screening tests. They're like, can you do this or not? And sometimes it's a screening test, but it's really that the initial development isn't what they're interested in. That's just to get the seed in place so that they can have an actual conversation with you and see how you react in a collaborative environment. I think if you look up, gosh, what's his name? Oh my gosh, he looks like the dude from. I'm skipping on his name now. Man, what's his name?
Off of what?
He looks like the dude from, the dude from The Big Lebowski. If you've seen that movie.
Oh yeah, you're talking about Terry. You're talking about the developer evangelist. His name is Terry something. I had him on my channel one time.
Not Terry. Oh gosh, I used to be a pretty big fan of his, but his political leanings got just outside for me. Oh my gosh, I got to figure this out. My memory's just been slipping lately.
That's because of your headaches.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name. I thought his name was Terry. I can't remember his last name though.
Well, anyways, he wrote a blog post about how they would. Oh, Ted Neward. That's who I'm thinking of.
Sorry.
Yeah. It started with a T. I knew you were right about that. He wrote a blog post about how they hired at whatever company he was at, and they talked about the first thing was they'd give you this assignment type deal, and you could write it in whatever language you want, and But part of it was to make sure, well, do you have tests? Do you do this? Do you do that? And then the next bit of it is, I think they would bring them in and have them do like a pair programming, like, hey, let's add a feature to it or something like that. I might be mixing his up with someone else's, but the idea there was, again, that second half was to see, well, how do you collaborate on actually making changes, and how do you handle it if somebody disagrees with you on a particular point that you make, and can you argue or not argue in a bad sense, but argue in a good sense for things that are right, or do you
can you convince?
Yeah. Can you teach back? So it's more about the conversation you have after the fact. So, but that's one of many different types of technical screenings, and I definitely get the point of not liking the ones where it's like, here's a
take home. I don't like
yeah.
Like I don't have a problem writing code in front of you.
Yeah.
Let's do this together. But like, for you to ask me to take the next 90 minutes of my life that I could be working on my passion project or playing Halo Wars, and you might get back to me. Because here's the thing, like, I know people that score like 90%. I've scored a 95% on a exam for a recruiter. Never got hired. And so it's just having so much that nothing results from it, that I'll just feel like it's a waste of my time.
How does that rated? Because I've done some hacker rank ones where they have a rating like that, a percentage rating, but based on your submission, how much of it you get right. There's some tricky stuff in hacker rank that they don't give you all the test cases that without exposing them or whatever. But has that been like, how do they rate what you get? A 95%, unless it's purely off of test submissions, how many tests pass? And do they give you all the tests?
I think this was like multiple choice or whatever.
Oh, it's a multiple choice test. Oh, even worse. Like, that's just, multiple choice is literally how well do you regurgitate information, which isn't what our jobs are. Part of it is to have the context, but to remember it.
Unlike law firms and hospitals, the people that run or manage these shops are not developers, and that's the most annoying.
Yeah, or they are. Sometimes they are, and they're not.
My experience, they're finance, they're accountants. Here's an interesting scenario, right? So imagine that you weren't in a relationship. Imagine that you lived in like the Dominican Republic or something, okay?
Yep.
And it comes down to negotiating a salary. They like you, right? But they claim that they don't have the budget for what you want. And you say, oh, what can you offer me? They say, well, on top of 3 to 4 weeks vacation, even though we can't give you what you would like, for $25,000 less per year, we are willing to offer you a woman once a week as part of our package. Like, would you consider that as a male? No, probably
not.
I think it's interesting. I will want to run a poll on that. Well, you just think about the lifestyle of a typical programmer, the amount of time that they spend investing. I know I'm socially awkward, right? So I'm pretty horrible with women. So you think about the people that just have like hella testosterone. They a good number of them are introverts, and like how when you introduce a social dynamic into that as part of the salary, or the compensation. Like, what do we respond to? We respond to money. What does money buy? Well, it buys freedom, right? It buys status. What is status? Status is something that attracts, right?
Yeah.
So you say no just off rip, maybe because we're recording, but like, I'm not calling you
No,
out. I'm curious if
yeah,
the
no,
conversation was offline, if it was something that you would, if you would take, if you would pause and then respond versus immediately no, right?
yeah, no, I don't think so. Let's go to, the fact that finding, a mate or whatever. I think that process itself is probably more exhilarating than what you end up with. If it's a service rendered, I don't know that you get the same sort of, you know,
It's probably based on maturity.
satisfaction from it.
Whoa.
I don't know.
The difference
Um,
is if you're looking for love or if you're basically accepting that you're an animal and there's certain needs,
yeah,
food, reproduction, like your biological needs. Like money, to me, money is a medium for satisfying biological needs. Status, reproduction, right? Or the act of reproduction. Those are the two, I mean, obviously food, but the two prior, like those are the biggest influencers of our lives on this earth. You look at people in prison, what percentage does not involve those two?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's and you know, actually, if you think about it, and as you get into midlife and stuff like that, it, I've put a lot of thought into this in general about people with midlife crises or quarter life crises, and like what that is, and it's interesting that for the first 30 to 40 years of your life, a lot of it is about trying to mate and have kids, because that's like our biological imperative. But and everything is kind of laid out for you on what you're supposed to do. So there's school, there's getting a job that you know has a status, getting stable, and when you get into your 40s or whatever, we should be dying. Like, because our usefulness, once our kids are old enough to kind of, you know which at this point they should be, if we followed a more standard, natural progression. Like, now we've got 40 years because of what health has given us, and what meaning do you find in it? And if you're not going, that's why I think a lot of people in their 40s or whatever will go out and with midlife crisis, they'll do that, but it's all because they're trying to restart the whole cycle again. If you think about it, like, what do a lot of people in their 30s, late 30s, 40s start doing? They go to their second spouse, and they have another family. So they start over at the teenage level. They get the status symbols that will attract, whoever they're trying to attract, and then they'll have kids with that person. They'll divorce their first family, and then they go through that entire cycle, which lasts another 15 to 20 years, and then they die.
Well, what's interesting is your play on word. You say crisis. Is it really a crisis?
Absolutely.
It's not a revelation.
No, it's a crisis. That a revelation is how you'd probably get out of it, but it's people react to this differently. If you took a look at, I was listening to this, I think, Jungian psychiatrist guy. Have you ever listened to the Art of Manliness podcast?
No.
It's a pretty good podcast. He covers a lot of a range of topics, but this guy I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's got a book called The Middle Passage, and he talks about this fact, and it is a crisis because you reach this point and there's no answer. Society gives you no answer for what you're supposed to do after the age of about 40. Periods. So everybody just about most people will go through like a crisis of some sort, and it might last years. It could start way earlier than 40, could start later, but it's a crisis of like you've fulfilled your obligation to, you've probably at this point in your life fulfilled your obligation to the to the advancement of humanity in terms of, you know, sexual reproduction and passing on your genetic material to the next generation. And you've done everything that society has ascribed as what you're supposed to do, which is, you know, you go to school, high school, maybe college, or you start a trade, you start a job, you become masterful at that, you meet a spouse, you get married, you have kids, and then you reach this age when you're kind of, you know, your kids are getting old enough that they can kind of watch themselves. You don't have a lot of upward mobility potentially in your job. There's not a lot for you to go. You start to question what is there now, and there's no prescribed script you can follow. So you have to posit the meaning or posit the steps there yourself, and that's an uncomfortable position to be in. And so it does manifest as crisis, and people handle it differently. Like I said, I think people start the cycle over again is a common thing. If you look at it, just people cheat on their spouses, they go have new families, they get divorced, and they start that whole cycle over again. I think my cousins just basically went through that. So my brother-in-law took another approach, which was killing himself. That's actually a pretty common, you know, unfortunately, it's a pretty common way to handle this thing. But it's a.
You don't think there's more involved?
There's more involved, but
like, chemistry, in regards like brain chemistry, things not being right, like the serotonin, like.
Yeah, I mean that stuff all contributes to it. But the script that I have in my head is that you know, you took a situation like that where he was already having he had depression, and it was from his military service, and you add on top of it, and then this feeling like, you know, you've reached that pinnacle of what society tells you, that you have nothing left in front of you, and you marry it. So it's never going to be one thing over the other. It's all of these things in confluence, and you just decide, hey, this isn't really worth continuing on with.
What? I know this is
sorry, this has gone way off topic, but
I know this is deviating. Well, why is there such a huge suicide rate with war veterans?
Yeah,
it might sound like a dumb question, but like,
I think it's all the post-traumatic stress and stuff.
Right? I mean, I've heard rumors that like on average there's like 3 suicides a day or something of war veterans. I'm like, I don't know if that's true, but it's like, why?
Yeah, well, I can't say for certain, but I'm guessing it's the confluence of the fact that, again, you've got some pretty intense scenarios and situations that they were put in that probably did mess up their brain chemistry in a way that's difficult, and they can hobble along as long as they can find meaning in something else. But I think what happens is they eventually don't. Like I think you get out of the service, and maybe you even advance that moment where you have your script's over. Like, what do you look forward to? What do you do?
That, not comparing myself to someone in the military, but I mean, I had a depression. The day after I graduated college, I fell into a deep depression. I felt like my purpose was over, and I didn't know how to handle that. I was so used to putting out fires, having term papers, having projects, having labs to do, going to work during night shift. Like, I was so used to my brain always being pulled in all these different directions that after the storm, the calm after the storm, like I didn't know what to do with myself. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but you found something, obviously. But
I mean, as a human, like one thing that I think separates us from our animal counterparts is we tend to excel at adapting to our environments physically and perhaps mentally. Like I was in a bad state in Cleveland, like mentally, like there was nothing conducive for me having a positive outlook in life. Hence me moving down to Miami, where just looking at the cars, the beautiful women, I saw abundance, and I had to make that move, right? Hence adapting to an environment that I think is conducive for me to recognize my potential, or let alone chase it. So,
mhm.
according to the 2014 report by the Department of Defense, there were 1,080 suicide attempts, 245 suicides among active duty service members. Yeah, I was just talking about just veterans. Period. You said active
Yeah,
duty for all armed services in 2013. 2013 was, I think 2007 was probably correct me. I thought 2007 was like the peak of the Helmand Province um, area of war in Afghanistan, where like they were probably Iraq too. No, Iraq was. Oh, I'm getting confused. I know 2007 was probably one of the peak years for U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan and maybe Iraq, but I feel like Iraq was probably like 2007 was probably the surge of the insurgents.
yeah, I think you're right.
Because I
It's
remember playing Star Wars on my was it, maybe it wasn't Dreamcast, maybe that was too early. I just remember, I feel like it was Dreamcast. I just remember the video game in which my username was iSurgeon, right? And also it used to be like Los Zetas was my gamer tag, because Los Zetas was a Mexican cartel that tended to always make headlines. And I feel like that was like around 2007-ish. So I don't know.
yeah, yeah. I don't. I can't. It's all blending now because it feels so recent, the Iraq War and the 2009, but it's been like a decade
It's been 20
since
years.
that was the peak. You know,
2001 was the
20 years ago
9/11.
next year. Yeah,
Years, dude.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, yeah,
Number of veteran suicide deaths per year increased from 6,000 something in 2005. Like, is it like they they were put in a situation, they had to make a decision with their trigger finger, and the majority of them have to deal with that guilt, that conscience of all the lives that they destroyed. They,
yeah. I think it's
they have
some
to
of
live
that.
with
I think it's some of that. It's probably some of the survivor. What's it? Survivor
that guilt.
guilt as
Okay.
well. Like, why did my I make it out? My friends didn't. I think that my brother-in-law might have had some of that survivor's guilt. But the thing is I think if you have other meaning in life, that stuff weighs on you for sure. But it doesn't break you in a way. I was I
I mean,
was
it also depends on like, and I learned this firsthand with natural stuff, but like those mushrooms mess me up, and I'm still trying to manage it, right?
yeah
Like I'm still trying to manage it, like 6 months afterwards. But you also have to take into consideration what people put into their bodies that may exacerbate, for lack of a better term, or maximize whatever emotions they're feeling,
yeah. It's a
or not
multi-factor.
magnify or
Yeah,
amplify. Yeah.
it's a multi-factor situation. Um, Obviously, it's never just. That's why when you if you do get treated for depression now, they don't just say, well, I can give you drugs and it'll be good forever, although it sort of can be, as long as you continually take the drugs forever, and you up your dosage. But they always recommend therapy with it as well, and try to push you to therapy, because it's a combination of of those things that usually has a pretty good chance of getting you better. But I read this book or listen to rather. I say read, but I listen to books. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. I listened to it earlier this week, and that's maybe why my brain is so fresh on these thoughts is because he tells a story about this guy was in a concentration camp. He talks about his experiences in it, not so much in terms of documenting the atrocities and stuff like that, but just in how he got through it and kind of what psychological steps he went through in it. And he did it to frame up his school of psychology, which is called logotherapy, which is the way he puts his will to meaning, which is we're basically looking for meaning for our lives, and a lot of our depressions and neuroses and stuff come from not being able to ascribe meaning to what we do, and that seems pretty consistent with.
I think there's a substantial number of people that may have been. I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, right? I think I told you that before. So there's people that, when they were teenagers or young adults, they're like, F that. I'm going to have sex, lots of it, right? And so they just detach. They no longer, and they're pretty much like ostracized for giving in on their physical needs, right? But then you find them returning back to the organization, like in their 30s, like they get it out their system or they start dealing with life. And I have to admit that when you're carrying the world on your shoulder and like you hold yourself accountable, like that's really hard to do if you don't believe that there's someone looking out for you, right? But it's a lot easier mentally and of course it would be if you believe that, somewhere in the heavens, someone loves you and you pray to them and you know that they're listening. Like, I have a hard time believing that. But for the people that are convinced, I feel like their mental states are so much more healthier.
Oh yeah.
Right. They're stressed. Like they may live check to check. It's not an issue to them, right? Because they feel as if they're always going to be cared for. And in the cases or the areas of time that they're not cared for, their faith is being put to the test. Like that's the way they translate things. Like my whole family tree is a whole bunch of Jehovah's Witnesses, and there's a fine line between being a devout Christian or maybe even like Muslim versus being delusional. Like where do you separate that line, right? Because there's no science or really any logic to accredit someone's belief system. But like even with my family, like they're convinced when someone dies, they're convinced that person is just taking a nap and they're going to be resurrected. Like the conversation that you would listen to and you would look at them and they're dead serious. Like they really believe every single thing in the scripture. It can't be disputed. So
yeah. Well, that's what have you ever looked into existential philosophy at all?
Hold on for one thing. Let me try to. He was helpful in providing some data.
Oh,
your 20s aren't part of life. What are you responding to? Did I say something about 20s aren't part of life, or Deshaun?
Oh, I didn't know we were having commenters.
Oh, you didn't see him provide that stat?
No.
Oh, you thought I just pulled that out of nowhere?
Yeah, I'm like, oh wow, he was able to Google that pretty quickly. Holy cow.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, John. There you go. John is my neighbor in Canada when I'm up there. You said people came back in their 30s after life. A fair number. Yeah. Every time I have my downs, I really think about is me being agnostic in regards to faith really serving me well? But it's hard because I feel like I'm selling out. If logically it doesn't compute, like religion doesn't compute. But I feel like there's something to gain from it if I could just bypass thinking about it, right? But the thing is faith is it's really, to me, faith is nothing but wishful thinking. Like it's confirmation bias in which there's it's your emotional investment, right? No one has faith in something that doesn't work, that's not going to favor them in the future. That's not faith at all. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of a conflict logically with me.
Well, yeah. And if you get into existential philosophy, that's exactly what they were trying to solve. So Nietzsche, if you look at, he's one of the, I guess he wasn't really an existentialist, but he puts a lot of ideas out there that are picked up by existentialist philosophers. Anyways, his entire look at life was, if because one of his famous phrases was like, God is dead, or something like that. And that wasn't an assertion by him in terms of like, I want God to be dead or whatever. He said that the modern thinking is basically killed off. Like we've rationalized the existence of an actual powerful being out of our heads. And once you do that, it takes a big portion of meaning out, of the way. And so he was worried about people falling into nihilism and then, eventually just being without meaning, just killing themselves off. And so his like prescription for that, or what he kind of pushed people towards, is to try to become what he called the Ubermensch, which is, find meaning in being better than yourself, or by becoming the best that you can be, and make that the purpose, versus trying to get to heaven or whatever like that. I think Camus is another existentialist philosopher, and if there's a book called The Myth of Sisyphus, and he's trying to ask the only really philosophical question that matters, which is, should you kill yourself or not? And he talks about and he explores that, and he decides it's not. And I can't remember what his how he comes to that conclusion. But the interesting thing, the way the myth of Sisyphus was the guy that in was it Greek stories, he angered the gods, so he was forced to roll the rock up the hill and then have it go back down and then go back to the bottom and push it up the hill again. Mm-hmm. And his thing was, he imagined that Sisyphus would be happy. Because he still had the even though he was forced to do this menial thing every day, at least he has control over his own faculties and has meaning in it, or something like that. I can't remember exactly how it works, but yeah, that's existentialism is all about a reaction to how do you find purpose in life without the existence of God, without some sort of higher meaning. What's the purpose of existence in general? So how do you contemplate it, and what do you do about it? So
are you familiar with Scientology?
Yes and no. I'm familiar with it, but I don't know the ins and outs. So
I was in New York City like maybe 5 years ago, and I was just being a tourist, just walking down the street, and I saw a Scientology museum. I had to go in, all right? And they're pretty good at keeping your attention, all right? They put me in a miniature movie theater, and they kept on showing me one video that would end with a question, that the next video, if I wanted to learn the answer to that question, the next video would provide that. And it was just a chain of videos that was like, it was really interesting. And what I remember from it was their philosophy, from what I can remember. And of course, someone the maybe 5 people that watch my videos can correct me, was that in order to like live forever or live a really, really long time, you have to keep creating. Like that's what I captured from it. That's what I remember their theory was you have to keep creating if you want to keep living. And I honestly agree with that, right? Not necessarily for immortality, but that's, I feel like we're really not that different from an ant colony or a bee colony. Like the majority of us are workers. The majority of us with public school system are trained to be obedient to the system. And then there's a small percentage of us that are the overseers that have the whip, that give us direction and guidance, right? And they tell us, they dress in costumes and they're the chosen ones. And I believe that that's what the human animal is, right? So honestly, if I were to revisit religion, I know, like, to me, all religions are cults, including the Catholic Church. Whenever you have someone wearing a weird costume, like, it's a cult, right? Um, I honestly, because I spent like an hour in that Scientology museum, they really piqued my interest. I know, like, everybody thinks they're crazy, but the things that they were saying, they did a good job piquing my interest.
Have you looked at Eastern religions? Have you explored Buddhism and stuff like that?
The other side of my family are Buddhists, yes, but I honestly haven't invested any time to understand what it actually is or what it means.
Yeah, one of the things that, I mean, because there's a lot of stuff built up around Buddhism too, but when you strip all of that away, there's kind of a core philosophy of it that's really in line with philosophical like principles and stuff like that you can, where stuff makes sense, at least to me, that it does. Um, uh, and it's closer in line with a lot of modern thinking, and I don't know, it's worth exploring that stuff for sure. But
Was
I don't.
was that famous protest I thought during the Vietnam War where that person calmly sat Indian style and lit themselves on fire?
Mm-hmm.
Are not Buddhists,
I think that was a Buddhist monk.
Else?
I think that was a Buddhist monk.
What is becoming Ubermensch? Seems like it could fit neatly into Christian thinking. I don't know what Ubermensch is, and I'm sure I'm butchering the pronunciation or enunciation of it.
So Ubermensch was what I mentioned with Nietzsche and what he was saying, in a world without a God, how do you find meaning, or what are you living for? Like, what's your, and his kind of prescription was the idea of that you should strive to be the best person you could be, to become the Superman or the Ubermensch. It's basically to build upon yourself, and I think that's probably similar to the idea of being a saint. It's just, where's the where's the the motivation coming from? So with sainthood or whatever, I mean, part of it's internal, desire to to have everlasting life and not go to hell, and some of it might be finding meaning in serving others, which is definitely a way to find meaning. But it starts with the position of that there's an external being you're trying to fit into the plan that's kind of prescribed to you. Whereas, like with Nietzsche and the Ubermensch, which is very similar in outcome probably, but it's how do you light that within when you have no real external, there's no real external thing out there that you can say, hey, this is why. It's got to be kind of like this internal push or desire. So yeah, Hitler did. He took that. Yeah, that Nietzsche got a bad rap because of Hitler, because he got, abducted by by Hitler to kind of do that. But yeah, it's his philosophy is definitely not about racial racial stuff. So it's pretty stupid. Hitler really screwed up a lot of stuff.
I can only deviate. I can only imagine
Yeah.
what this world would be like if Hitler was successful. Would they have had eventually eradicated Asians?
I don't know. You should watch if you haven't watched it. It's fun. Go on Amazon Prime and watch at least the first season of Man in the High Castle.
Okay.
Because that's a depiction of what would happen, what they predicted would happen if Hitler won the war.
I think about the same thing about
Yeah.
the Confederates. Like, if they would have won, like, how different would life be everywhere? Like, and then this can go into a deeper conversation about universe, multi-universe, and if it really is infinite,
Oh
then
yeah.
surely there's a likelihood that there's another very similar Earth. If it's infinite, then there has to be near copies of everything, right? And one can argue against that, but if it's infinite, the probability exists, and then that just pretty much contributes to mental health issues of trying to process that.
Yeah.
So,
There was a cool. I gotta figure this. There was a, and I don't know if that's
you read the
particular
book.
to the Man in the High Castle book as well. They did a study this week, or they did a study, and they I gotta find it out, where they had two people observe a history that was different, but they were both right. Like they were both proven histories. Oh gosh, I gotta find this. But it kind of talks to that whole multi-universe thing, or literally the same movie with two different screens on it. Gosh, I wish I could find the.
You remember the books? I don't think they make them anymore. But then again, I don't go to libraries. Remember the books where like they had decision paths and you could choose which decision and then you jump to a certain page number?
Yeah, choose your own adventure books.
Is that
Yeah,
still a thing?
yeah, yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of that's in games now and stuff like that. If you think about it,
Yeah.
a lot of games are choose your own adventure. But the like, there's actually a tool you can use called Twine, where you can build up those choose your own adventure narratives. And it puts in like in the browser. It's real nice. You can kind of click through and say, oh, I want to do this right now, and it'll bring you to the next spot. And you build it out as this whole tree structure. It's really a really cool tool. Gosh, I've got to find where he talked about this.
John, are you agnostic? Interactive fiction is the term.
Yeah, interactive fiction.
Well, this became a very deep conversation. This all stems from if a compensation package included a beautiful woman once a week coming to your home, would you take a $20,000 pay cut? You immediately said no. And then somehow we started talking about mental illness and
Well, I talked about the
Hitler.
meaning in life. Yeah, which
Oh, yeah, because I said, you quickly say no, but money is nothing but a medium for reproducing and for food and status. No, I said status and reproduction. That's what money is a medium for. That's how it's used. That's how it gets accomplished, right?
but I think maybe you answered it later about when you're talking about the this is strangely enough the Scientologist about creating, and often creating things requires time and money and stuff like that too. So if I wanted to go out and do construct things with wood, I need to have the goods to buy those kinds of things and actually go through and execute on that creative task. So the act of creation, I think, is costs money too, and is equally as absorbent. I mean, or gaming, but it's the same kind of thing. It's when you're being challenged with a creative task in general, or you have to think That's fun, and to me it has nothing. Maybe it has something to do with a side effect of the sexual reproduction, but it's not necessarily your driving motivation at the time. I mean, I guess maybe have you ever known anyone who's, playing a game and their wife comes in like, oh, or their spouse comes in like, oh, hey, let's, go do whatever. And no, I just got to finish this level.
Money, okay. Do you agree that status generates attraction?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, good. Because there's no way that women would fight over, Notorious B.I.G., right? If he wasn't a glamorized rapper, right? Like, I think most people would agree that if they showed a photo of me and my bio to some women, they would probably say 5 or 6, whatever. Right? I'm not a chick. I'm not meant to be beautiful. Right? I accept that. Now, in that bio, if they included I earn $600,000 a year, I guarantee you my rating would go up. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, probably.
Yeah. So I don't know. Either we're talking past each other or we're saying the same thing.
Probably saying the same thing.
Yeah. Well, money buys you stuff you can make fun things with, and the role of money is simply a convenient means of acquiring the specific resources you actually need. Yeah, but what I'm saying is, atomically, we need sex, and we need.
Well, we don't need it. That's just
we do need it. We do. Need it.
Some need it, but it's an imperative. I don't think humans necessarily need it. There's definitely humans that go through their entire lives never having it.
And no. They may not have it with other people,
no.
right?
Yeah.
Like you have been voluntarily celibate. You've heard that term before. In Toronto, there was a dude that I thought he mowed down a whole bunch of women, like with a van or something. John may know something about that. But there's people that are voluntarily celibate where they hate women and they commit atrocities because they can't get laid.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It there's no. You see dogs, you see apes. Like we're still animals, man. That stuff is important. All right, so
yeah.
People that say it's not. I'm not challenging you. Maybe I am, but like, I don't think they've really examined themselves or examined why people are locked up or why people like even peacocking. I don't know if peacocking is a word, but I'm going to create that as a verb, right? These people driving Ferraris and Lamborghinis down in Miami, like that's what you do to attract the hottest chick with the biggest butt and biggest boob. Like you peacock, you get material possessions so that those people can gravitate towards you, and then you unzip your pants.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's all about. Thanks. It's all about that there's an evolutionary need as a species to reproduce, and obviously some people don't get selected for that option because they don't present that. And yeah, they do get resentful. But I think the thing is like I said, is that's not the entirety of your life for necessarily for everyone. And if you get to an age where you've fulfilled your that purpose of passing on your genes, it's like what else what other meaning do you find in life, and why shouldn't you just off yourself? I will challenge John here on being an atheist, though, because I think there's a very specific terminology that I like. People talk about being theist or agnostic or atheist, and I don't think atheist is actually a good position to be in, and it's not. I don't know if it's intellectually honest, to be honest, because it kind of implies, in short, that you can know that there's not some sort of higher power, higher being. It's an assertion of that fact, just in the same way that theism is an assertion in the opposite direction. I think the most the most honest position to be in is agnostic, which is to put up a big flag saying, I don't know if I can know.
Well, okay. So what am I? Because I thought I was agnostic. My 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 thoughts are there's no doubt in my mind that there's intelligent design. Now, whether it's an army of beings that have created the heavens and the earth, right, or it's one person, like to me that hasn't been proven. You can show me a Quran or a Bible all you want; it means nothing to me. It
Yeah.
doesn't, right? But there's no doubt in my mind that this ecosystem that we call Earth, this aquarium that we call Earth, and there's a whole bunch of planets are aquariums, right?
Yeah. Well, then you're
I got my
probably
mind that there wasn't engineering or thought behind that, like, but the best response that I've received when I was in Manila, I asked this dude that claimed to be atheist. I was like, he said, imagine a hole in the ground and it rains. What's going to happen, if it keeps on raining? That void in the ground gets perfectly filled with water. And people say, look at it. Like that only a mind can fill in every single gap of least resistance, within this void. And he said, no, it's just water covering a hole. Now, he articulated it a lot better than I did, but he was just saying that what we perceive as like some type of like engineering thought can be as simple as something filling a void that we just don't understand, but it's hella natural, right? So
yeah. The same thing with because the intelligent design is like, I think they call it the teleological argument for the existence of God, is that we're so complex that that we there's no way that you could be there has to be a system put in place to produce this. But then you talk about evolution, and evolution is a very powerful system, you think about it. But then what you get is a secondary level, which is that God is so powerful that he can design a very complex system that can produce complex systems. So you add another layer of abstraction to use it in programming terms. But I think so John responded to what I was saying there. And so much of that is about our relationship with a specific religion. And yeah, I've heard that too, but I think that the thing is if saying you're an atheist to reject specific, Judeo-Christian things is there's a layer of depth there that you need to go deeper on it to say, strip away the all of the religious stuff on top of it and talk about the deeper question of which is a philosophical question about the existence of God or not. And yeah, you might, you're saying that there's a God that might, and that that there's not a personal God you pray for. You could go to heaven, because heaven's a Christian construct. I mean, heaven in theory, you think about heaven, what it could be. Here's a totally non-religious way of thinking about it. So you go to bed at night and you have a dream, right? And the world is very fuzzy, but it's there, and you're able to interact with it and stuff like that. I lost you. And then at the end of the dream, you wake up and you're brought back into a layer of reality that's infinitely more clear compared to your dream world. And you could imagine that same effect when you die brings you out a level to something where you see even a broader world, and you can experience more. Human like, we personify. Could be, though. The thing is, we don't know. And I think that's what's the oddest part about Christianity is that there's definitely no proof of it, no real proof in the way that we could think about it scientifically, but there's absolutely, you can't disprove it either. It could actually be 100% real, and in exactly the way that they say that it is.
People hold on to, because I can't disprove that there is a a invincible worm that is from another galaxy that is undetectable going through my ear canal. Can't prove it, right? Because it's undetectable, right?
Yeah.
So as soon as you start having those conversations, it's not worth having a conversation anymore.
Yeah. Well, and that's what gets into faith. And you talked about faith and what faith is.
Yeah.
If you reduce it down to it, it's believing in something that's absolutely absurd without question. And I like one of the biggest existentialist philosophers, Kierkegaard. Well, that's what it is.
No, faith is. We can agree to disagree, but I think faith is having a confirmation bias for something that you cannot prove, but is in your favor. It's beneficial to you, right? Like I said, like it's wishful thinking. No one has faith in something that's going to be detrimental. That's not what faith is. Faith is having a belief system that you're invested in for a positive outcome, right?
Yeah.
So I have faith that it's going to be. I have faith that I'm not going to get hit by a car anytime soon. I have faith that my mind is going to continue to recover or improve for the next 6 months. Like, it's always beneficial. It's not absurd. It's
well, yeah, but that's the light term. That's the lighter term,
okay.
faith. But when you talk about faith in terms of like a religion and stuff like that, it's true faith is to believe in something even though it's entirely irrational to do so.
Like resurrection.
Yeah, which is why you can't really argue with people who have faith, is because argument requires a rational thought, and the entire idea behind faith is to believe despite rational thought. And so no matter what you say, it doesn't matter, because that's the whole point, which is actually pretty brilliant if you think about it.
Something that I'm not smart enough to translate was High Altitude said, even if we need to have children as a species, how this translates to an imperative for the individual is very unclear. And much of the imperative can be carried by society and culture rather than by the individual. I have no clue what that means. I can't process that. It sounds very high level. I don't know do you know what it means?
Translated to imperative for individual, very unclear. Like, maybe if we put this in terms of like, if the goal of as a society or a species is to have kids, for instance, maybe on an individual translation, what's my goal in that? Is it to actually pass on my genes specifically, or what if it's actually? But as a species, it might be but it might be better for as a species as a whole for us to say, let's try to get the most, and this is maybe heading down some fascist routes, but I'm not saying that I agree with it, but it could be to try to bring together the most perfect humans that we could find and have them breed and be part of making that possible.
Okay.
From a species perspective. And that's where you could get into real dangerous, and how do you translate that as to imperative individual, because that's a thought that come up, is that you want to try to produce a master group of people that are the alphas of society and focus on getting them laid and not you. But I don't think that's the case. So, but yeah, I'm just making a guess there. I don't know. I don't. You get in trouble when you start to go down that path, anyways, in terms of thought exercises.
Yeah, with people that aren't willing to have a conversation and ask why or what led you to that belief or that idea. Humans have the capability to tell fictional stories and act as if it was real, physical, think, like laws, constitutions, religious practices, etc. And that gives humans the capability to have gigantic social structures with millions of people having a shared understanding. I mean, for a society as a whole, people need to have sex, but for each individual, there is no such need. I guess I can only speak for myself and my history and what I've seen. Again, if we look at the prison system, right, at least for the United States, everybody that is in prison, even if they're really innocent, it's all based on animal behaviors, right? Like we replace food and sex with money. Well, we didn't really replace it. Money is the medium to get both, right? And if you look at the prison system and why people are locked up, it has everything to do with those basic animal needs or obsessions, right? And so, yeah, are there people out there that are asexual? Yeah, I think I know one, because that woman does not respond to anything. Like I don't think she's had a boyfriend in like 15 years, and like she's reasonably like attractive. But yeah, those people exist. But I think they're like very, very like they represent an exception with the definition of exception, right? So,
but it's a higher level need, though, right? It's certainly not it's not very low on the need scale. It's like saying that I want to, that I don't know, I need to be entertained as a need because it'll help me with my
WTF? Why men get married, and all of the consequences that are likely to result from that. Is it? I know this is going to a completely different conversation, but we're talking about like sex isn't really necessary, and I'm saying it is because why would someone that is usually the breadwinner will give away so much of their civil rights by getting married and letting themselves be vulnerable to their wife's manipulation of judges, lawyers, cops, and every other component or pawn of that system? Like, why would people sign up for that? Because sex is important. Why would people give up their multi-million-dollar house? Why would they give up so much of what they have?
But you're inverting that, though. I mean,
I'm inverting it. Why do people get married?
If sex is important,
get married?
Yeah, but the thing is that the sex doesn't imply that you need any of those things you're talking about. I think what you're doing there is you're protecting when you do it's probably closer aligned with when you have kids. You're kind of protecting them, and you're trying to be involved with the process to make sure that not only do you have the kids, but they live long enough to see that through, which again goes back to our once you hit 40, though, that's when people start to flip out and go on to their second family because they've fulfilled that particular obligation. But the thing is that like sex is a desire, but I don't know if it's and yeah, as a species, we totally need it, but I don't think it's a. I read that book. I read that book earlier, The Man's Search for Meaning, and it was interesting. One of the things that he talked about in that's relevant here is that in the concentration camp that he was in, unlike pretty much every other situation where you put humans into a confined situation, since their basic needs weren't met, their actual basic needs weren't met, sex was never even thought of. There wasn't, sodomy and all of that stuff within the male camps. They had no time to think about it because there wasn't, their basic needs, their two layers of their real needs aren't being fulfilled.
I get that.
So,
but I understand that.
So if it's
apparently everybody's against me,
yeah.
So I'll concede.
I don't know that it's a need, but I think that you're saying that it's definitely like what important, and it has a huge impact on the way that we think about stuff. But
I think it completely warps the way I think it warps how you respond to events, right? What do people do for that warm hole? They do a lot. They spend a lot of money on it. They peacock for it. Like it's something that we're genetically engineered to just think about how many people have ruined their lives by stepping out of relationships. It's hard coded in us. Like, do people? Do you think Jeff Bezos or any other behemoth would just they couldn't say no, right? Like, I don't know. I think it has more power than you guys are willing to acknowledge.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying it's not powerful. I think I'm questioning whether it's a basic need.
It's a basic need.
You must have it. No, but
once you get it, it's a basic need. Now, if you don't get it at all, then you're probably good. I was raised in a religious family, right? But once you start getting it, it's like it's a drug. It's a natural drug. You can't overdose on it, right? It releases what are the endorphins, dopamine, whatever that stuff is.
Yeah.
It does it. The same thing when you do cardio for a long period of time, your chemistry changes. Of course, I would say that sex is very temporary versus I don't know.
Yeah,
I beat a dead horse.
But yeah, and that's like you said, it's built in because we as a society need, like, the whole evolutionary principle is for the next generation to live on.
You have a dog, right?
Yeah.
Are your dogs spayed or neutered?
Yeah, they are both.
Okay. I have a dog, I had cats, and it's all mammals. I don't know about reptiles or birds, but mammals, like, we get violent, man. We tip tables over, all right? So fight, basic need or not.
Fight's all about sex, though, too. It's about establishing your place in the hierarchy so that you can find mates. I don't think it's a basic need, but I think there are definitely other, like, I think if you strip away your real needs, which are, food, shelter, those kinds of things, like if you strip down to those and you don't have those, obviously you're going to be fighting for those, and sex doesn't matter at all. It's not even going to be a part of your equation. It's only once those other things your true needs are satisfied in terms of just living.
I think sex is an escape, right? Once you get into that act, I think that it's like, I used to play ping pong a lot, right? When I'm playing ping pong, like, I don't think about anything else. Like, time flies, right? I'm just in a completely different dimension. And I think, like, sex is just like that. It's something that all of a sudden you're just in the present, and you don't, in general, I don't think you focus on you don't focus on other things. So I think that's just one of the side effects of why it's so valuable. I don't know. I'm having a hard. I lost this debate, so.
I don't think you lost it. But maybe we might be saying the same thing, but just in a different way. So, but yeah, I mean, if you said to a starving person, you can have sex or you can have food, I'm sure they're gonna pick food.
High altitude actually has a really good point. If your picture is correct, it is hard to see how prostitution cannot be universally accepted. That's a good point. That's because we know how to manipulate situations, and underage sex workers and pimping people out. Like, stuff can be regulated. It can, but you're right. That's a fair point. I'm tapping out.
Yeah, it's 7:55, I suppose. Or 7:55 here.
The Christian God also going married to Jesus, so I guess they're not immune to it. Yeah, that's a good response. All right, so I won. In regards to my passion project, I didn't do anything, but my contract ends today, and so I have a feeling I'll have a lot of time on my hands, and so I'm just going to spend my business days working on my passion project until I become gainfully employed again, and that's it. Did you do anything with the Elixir?
No. After that job opportunity fell off, my interest fell off because it's just like with that, and I got to get up to speed on .NET 5 too, just to get.
Why?
to just keep my skills sharp, I guess. I haven't done much coding other than some of the Elixir stuff in the last 2 months. So I've got to get back on the horse here. I have a hard time coming up with a project that I feel like can motivate me well enough to work on it nowadays. Like, I don't want to just write code to write code. I want it to feel like there's some end game for it, or that I'm helping someone or helping myself or something. So,
well, we got a lot of background noise now, so I'm going to use that as a reason to hop off. But
yep.
We'll check up.
Yep.
I did the last few weeks, just to repurpose an old PHP script I wrote ages ago. Yeah, you can do PHP. So, all right, y'all. Thanks for arguing against me. I thought you were on my side, but okay, we'll catch up.
All righty.
Next Friday.
Good stuff. Yep. See ya.